Dear Edu graduates, ayan. Am I loud and clear, class? Okay, sige. So a pleasant morning to all. So let us now start our session for today about assessment in students' learning, particularly assessment in students' learning 1 and 2. Okay, so for today, minerge ko yung dalawang subject natin, particularly si assessment 1 with respect to assessment 2. And then magbibigay tayo ng mga sample let problems aside from the lecture discussion of the essential topics that you must know for our review session for today. Okay, so let's now go along. So like I said, we focus with assessment. So on the screen, you can see different words that are related to our course assessment in student learning 1 and 2. So we have feedback, we have descriptors, assessment itself, equity, reliability, grades, learning, moderation, fairness, qualifiers, validity, alignment, weighting, as achievement, manageability, principles, and so on and so forth. So all of this, I do expect that you are able to cover up with your course assessment in student learning 1 and 2. So like I said, this is a session in assessment in learning 1 and 2. So we will be starting first with the different basic concepts. We start first with the concept of test. A test is defined as an instrument which is designed to measure any quality, ability, skills, or knowledge, comprised of test items of the area it is designed to measure. So I know you're familiar with this already, but when you are going to measure a certain construct, be it a quality, be it ability, or the learning of your students, the skills or the knowledge, you make use of a test. And it is an assumption that you already have the knowledge on how to construct a test because this has been embedded already in the course assessment in student learning 1 and assessment in student learning 2. And then also we have the idea about measure. It is a process by which traits, characteristics, and behaviors are differentiated. So actually, apat to. We have test, measurement, we have assessment. So assessment is a process of gathering and organizing data into an interpretable form to have basis for decision making. So here, may I request everyone to kindly mute yourselves. Ayan. Okay, so when we say assessment, it is the process of gathering and organizing data into an interpretable form to have basis for decision making. So, ibig sabihin, kapag assessment ang tinutukoy natin, this pertains to the process, yung pamamaraan, kung paano tayo nakakakuha ng data on how we gather or organize those data for us to come up with something that we can use for our decision making, particularly inside our classroom, regarding the teaching and learning process that's happening. It is also a prerequisite to evaluation. Okay, so take note of that. It provides the information which enables evaluation to take place. Okay, so ibig sabihin daw, without assessment, we cannot conduct any evaluation. Another basic concept is evaluation. Evaluation is a process of systematic analysis. So here naman, pag sinabi natin evaluation, you tend to have a critical analysis of the qualitative or quantitative data to make sound judgment or decision. Kung si assessment kanina, ang tinutukoy natin doon is yung process ng pag-gather ng data natin, which are the required is the analysis po Ayan, hello. Am I audible now? Medyo nagbibitaw talaga ang internet. Let me share again my screen. Ayan, nakikita na po. You can use the chat box to respond. Nakikita na po yung screen ko.
Yes
Ayan.
po.
Yes
Sige,
po.
balik lang tayo. So yung unang diniscuss natin na concept, we have the test, we have the measurement, we have assessment and evaluation. So ang focus natin will be assessment, particularly the different modes of assessment. So yung unang mode of assessment na tinatawag is yung traditional. Alam niyo na to as a teacher, ito yung tinatawag nating objective tests or yung paper and pen test. Okay? So kapag paper and pen test, take note, ang ina-assess natin dito is just the low-level thinking skills of our students. So example nito ay mga standardized tests, teacher-made tests. Okay? What are the advantages of the traditional, particularly the paper and pen test? We have the first is scoring is objective. Ibig sabihin ng scoring is objective, may tamang sagot, may maling sagot. Okay? So kapag tama, tama. Pag mali, mali. While on the other hand, another advantage is the administration is easy because students can take the test at the same time. So pwedeng sabay-sabay nating i-conduct or pwede natin rather i-conduct ang test sa mga estudyante natin ng sabay-sabay. Okay? While on the other hand, the disadvantage will be the preparation of instrument is time-consuming, prone to cheating. So ang isa sa mga disadvantage ni traditional, it's because objective siya, may tamang sagot, okay? So prone na magkopyahan kasi may definitive answer. And then at the same time, on the part of the test maker, time-consuming siya. Kasi there are lots of processes and consideration na dapat i-consider in preparing a paper and pen test. Okay, another, by the way, ayan, ito na po yung injection natin ng mga sample or parallel let na questions. So along our discussion, meron tayo mga questions na nakaparallel kay let. So, ganun na lang. Sasagutan natin siya. So, discussion, may question. Discussion, may question. So, ganun yung process natin for today. So, my first question here is, which is an advantage of a teacher-made test over those of standardized test? Sir, ano ba yung mga standardized test? Yung mga standardized test, ito kasi yung mga test na ginagamit for a definitive construct. So, for example, IQ, or intelligence quotient. So kapag intelligence quotient, meron tayong definite na test na ginagamit for that. It's because it has been crafted by experts na talagang valid and reliable yon na nagme-measure ng IQ. Unlike yung teacher-made test, okay, gawa lang siya ng mga teacher as the name implies. By the way, tuloy lang muna natin with the question. Which is an advantage of a teacher-made test over those of the standardized test? Teacher-made tests are A, highly reliable. B, better adapted to the needs of the students. C, more objectively scored. D, highly valid. Sige, you can use the chat box to respond para makita natin. So parang some sort of practice. Ayan. Miss Era Duwayan answered B. Ayan. Puro B ang sagot ng ibang mga students. Ayan. B, B. Okay, letter B. So tingnan natin. So the correct answer is letter B. Correct. Since we are talking about a teacher-made test, we can do necessary adaptation nun with respect to the needs of your pupils. In the rest, highly reliable, highly valid, more objectively scored, pasok siya dun sa tinatawag nating standardized tests. Okay? So far, may question po ba tayo? Tuloy lang natin. So every class, so meron tayong mga some sort of commercial. So every class has the Queen Bee, the Sketcher, In Love Couple, Singers, Caffeine Machine, Sports Guy, Different, Back of Class Crew, Stressed Out, Gossiping Machine, Hyperactives, Musician, Out of Earth, Hard Workers, Bullies, and Class Bunkers. Tuloy lang natin with the modes of assessment. So meron tayong mode na performance. So it's description, a mode of assessment that requires actual demonstration of skills or creation of products of learning. So dito, ang ina-assess natin is yung performance per se. Okay? So ang example natin yan ay yung practical tests, oral and oral tests, projects. So merong output and then merong demonstration ng skills. Advantage will be the preparation of the instrument is relatively easy. So mas madali kasi isang task lang yung pine-prepare ng teacher. And then the measures behaviors that cannot be deceived. So ibig sabihin, hindi siya pwedeng madaya agad-agad. So kung ano yung alam, yun yung maipapakita with the performance. Yun na mapapakita through the output or the project. For the disadvantage, we have scoring tends to be subjective without rubrics. That's why kapag ang pinag-uusapan ay PETA or mga performance tasks, it is a must na si teacher ay gagamit ng rubrics so that they have basis on the grading of the output or of the performance. And then, pero isa sa disadvantage, kahit na madaling i-prepare yung instrument, kahit hindi pwedeng mapeke yung result or madaling madaya yung result, is that yung pag-administer ng performance tasks ay time-consuming. Kasi it's either you do it individually or by group. So, tsaka mahirap talagang i-assess yung performance. You really need to be objective based on the instrument that you're going to use for the performance results. Okay, another is yung tinatawag natin portfolio. It is a process of gathering multiple indicators of student progress to support course goals in dynamic, ongoing, and collaborative process. Examples, working portfolios, show portfolios, documentary portfolios. So dito, nagko-compile tayo ng mga output ni students na nagpapakita ng kanyang progress. Okay? So it measures students' growth and development, and it is an intelligence fair. So parang ipinapakita dito kasi yung work, yung best work ni student. Then on the other hand, ang disadvantage now will be the development is time consuming. So which is a disadvantage on the part of the student. So medyo hindi siya ganun kadaling i-prepare. And then rating tends to be subjective without rubric. So the same halos kanina with our performance. So without a rubric, so the result of the grading will be subjective. Okay, so we have here another question. Which is the least authentic mode of assessment? A, paper and pencil test in vocabulary. B, oral performance to assess students' spoken communication skills. C, experiments in science to assess skills in the use of scientific methods. And letter D, artistic production for music or art subject. Which do you think is the correct answer? Use the chat box, class. Ayan. So there are some who answered C, pero majority, we have letter A. So tingnan natin kung ano yung correct answer. Yan. Actually, the correct answer is letter A. It's the paper and pencil test in vocabulary. So pag sinabi natin kasing paper and pencil, di ba? It is the traditional. Pag sinabi natin authentic, ito yung mismo na talagang real performance ni students yung makikita natin. Okay, so si oral performance, experiments, artistic production, all of them are authentic form or mode of assessment. Okay, so ito, another commercial. So, good morning, teacher. So, lahat naman siguro tayo is dumaan sa ganyang situation. And this is considered the best childhood song ever. Okay? Yeah. So, with that, we just continue. So, now, we do a comparison of the 4 evaluation procedures. So we have placement evaluation and summative evaluation. So si placement evaluation, it is done before instruction. It determines mastery of prerequisite skills and it is not graded. So parang recall lang ito ng inyong mga previous knowledge. Pag sinabi naman nating summative evaluation, it is done after instruction, certifies mastery of the intended learning outcomes, and it is graded. So ano yung common naman sa kanila? So it determines the extent of what the pupils have achieved or mastered in the objectives of the intended instruction. It determines the student's strengths and weaknesses. Actually, yung mga concept na nasa screen ko are actually very self-explanatory. Place the students in specific learning groups to facilitate teaching and learning, serves as a pretest for the next unit, and serves as basis in the planning for a relevant instruction. So, formative versus diagnostic naman. So, si formative, it reinforces successful learning. Diba? It's because si formative, diba, pwede natin siyang gawin during instruction, right? So to support students' learning. And then it provides continuous feedback to both students and teachers concerning learning success and failures. So since we do it on the middle of or during the instruction, we determine whether our students will be capable of achieving good quality learning. And of course, take note, formative assessment is not graded. Then for the diagnostic assessment or evaluation, so it determines recurring or persistent difficulties. So pinapakita dito kung saan mababa, mahina or may weakness ang ating mga students. Searches for the underlying causes of these problems that do not respond to the first aid treatment. So pwede natin ito maging basis for us to determine what are the root causes of those difficulties of our learners. And it helps formulate a plan for a detailed remedial instruction. So the main purpose of diagnostic evaluation is for us to give solution to the weaknesses that we'll have or will be able to find out as per the result of our diagnostic evaluation. For the similarity, it is administered during instruction, okay, designed to formulate a plan for remedial instruction. It modifies the teaching and learning process and it is not graded. Okay? So, pakita lang natin through an illustration some ideas about our course, which is assessment. So, for a fair selection, everybody has the same exam. Please climb the tree. So, dito mapapakita natin that there is a bias with the task given. Obviously, ang mananalo dyan ay si monkey. So, some principles of high quality assessment. So, I hope naaalala pa natin. We have first is the clarity of learning targets. It should be clear and appropriate. And it includes what students know and what can do. And the criteria for judging students' performance. Okay, when we do assessment of students' learning, we make it sure that we only assess what the students know and what they can do, particularly kung ano yung nako-cover up natin with our instruction. And then the criteria for judging students' performance is also given to them so that they know how they will be graded. Next is the appropriateness of assessment methods. So the method of assessment to be used should match the learning targets. So parallel with the objectives that we have. It's valid, or the validity is one of the concerns as well. So this refers to the degree to which a score-based inference is appropriate, reasonable, and useful. Ibig sabihin, kapag valid, we're talking about that the assessment itself really measures what it is intended to measure. So sinusukat ang dapat sukatin. And also, it must be reliable. So reliability is another concern. So this refers to the degree of consistency when several items in a test measure the same thing. And stability when the same measures are given across time. Ibig sabihin lang ng reliability, so bigay ka ng test ngayon, you get the result. Then after certain period of time, you give another test parallel to the first that has been given, dapat it will yield the same result. Or should we say similar results. So doon natin masasabi na ang isang instrument ay reliable. Question class, nakakasunod pa po ba? Another is fairness. So fair assessment is unbiased and provides students with the opportunity to demonstrate what they have learned. So syempre, kung ano yung learning ni students, kung ano yung sakop ng ating learning, kung ano yung dapat ma-measure for every student, it should be fair and equal to all. In positive consequences, the overall quality assessment is enhanced when it has a positive effect on students' motivation and study habits. For the teachers, high quality assessments lead to better information and decision making about the students. Of course, we use results of our assessment for further positive things in the teaching and learning process. So further development, further implementation of programs, projects for the betterment of students. And then we also have practicality and efficiency. Assessments should consider the teacher's familiarity with the method, the time required, the complexity of administration, the ease of scoring and interpretation, and the costs. So those are the considerations that we must consider when we do prepare assessment. Okay. So take note, this is according to Albert Einstein. So regarding our education system. Everybody is a genius. So I do believe on that we all have our own knowledge and intelligence. But if you are going to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So imagine that. So that's why we must also consider the strengths of our learners or students. So we now proceed with the taxonomy of educational objectives. So we have the following. The first one is the cognitive, the affective, and then the psychomotor. So alam kong familiar na kayo dyan. Cognitive, the mind; affective, the feelings, emotions; psychomotor, skills. Okay, so isayin lang natin. This is according to Bloom 1956. So we have the taxonomy of educational objectives with respect to the cognitive domain. So we have the knowledge. So it's more of remembering of previous learning material, recall of a wide range of material, but all that is required is the bringing to mind of the appropriate information, represents the lowest level of learning outcomes in the cognitive domain. So it's more of the facts. Next is the comprehension, wherein it is the ability to grasp the meaning of the material. So more of comprehending, giving meaning to the learnings that you have gained. So it is shown by translating material from one form to another, by interpreting material, and by estimating future trends. We also have the application. It's the ability to use learned material into new and concrete situations. So application of rules, methods, concepts, principles, laws, and theories. Analysis is breaking down material into component parts. So something that is big, you chunk it or chop it into smaller pieces. So that is analysis. Okay? Why are we doing that? So that its organizational structure may be further be understood. And it include identification of parts, analysis of relationships between parts, and recognition of organizational principles involved. And we also have the synthesis. So kung si analysis kanina is breaking down the material into component parts, si synthesis naman is putting parts together. So you put them together to come up with something that is new. So stress creative behavior with major emphasis on the formulation of new patterns or structures. So sa synthesis, it's just like you are creating something out of the learnings that you have. Then lastly, we have the evaluation. So it's the ability to judge the value of material from a given purpose. So value judgment ang idea or concept nito. Then judgments are to be based on the definite criteria. Internal organization or external, which could be relevance to the purpose. Okay. An age-old argument. Okay. 15th century, if the earth is round, then explain this. 17th century, if gravity is real, explain that. So why is bird able? Then explain this. And then 21st century, if global warming is real, explain that. Okay. So now, aside from that Bloom's taxonomy, meron din tayong tinatawag na Bloom's revised taxonomy. So kanina, maaalala nyo na ang lowest form natin or level natin is knowledge, highest is evaluation. So dito, ang kaibahan lang is what? From noun, naging verb. Okay? Naging action word. So taxonomy of educational objectives, cognitive domain. So pakita lang natin yung mga further examples na pwede. First is about reading. So knowledge, knows vocabulary, understanding. We have reads with comprehension. Okay. Application, reads to obtain information to solve a problem. Analysis is analyzes text and outlines arguments. Synthesis is integrates the main idea across two or more passages. And then evaluation is predicts the conclusions in a text and offers alternatives. Are you still with me, class? Nakakasunod po ba tayo, EdUp graduates?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
How about yung iba? Are you still with me? You can use the chat box. Ayan.
Yes po.
Yes, according to Mr. Pedroso, BPED 4A. Same with Miss Gaho of BSE Math 4B and Miss Hilario. Okay, that's good. For mathematics, so here we're giving examples lang. We're differentiating the different levels. Knowledge knows the number system and basic operations. Understanding understands math concepts and processes. Application uses mathematics to solve problems. Analysis shows how to solve multi-step problems. Synthesis is derives proofs. And evaluation is critics, proofs, and geometry. So makikita natin talaga yung kaibahan ng level. So sa science, knows terms and facts. Understand scientific principles. Application is applies principles to new situations. Analysis is analyzes chemical reactions. Synthesis is conducts and reports experiments. And evaluation is critiques scientific reports. So I have here another lab question. With SMART lesson objectives in the synthesis in mind, which one does not belong the group or to the group? A, formulate. B, judge. C, organize. D, build. I repeat, with SMART lesson objectives in the synthesis in mind, which one does not belong to the group? Formulate, judge, organize, or build? Answer, please. You can use the chat box. Okay, letter B, according to Miss Naval. According to Gamboa, B. B for Miss Quijano. Gapilango, B. Aguilar, B. And mostly letter B. Take note how which does not belong to the group. Okay, good. The answer is judge. Bakit kaya judge? It's because it's more of the evaluation part. Okay? Very good. Ayan, mga papasa na talaga kayo kaagad ng let. You really know the idea and concepts behind every questions that we have. So here, I have another question. Which test item is in the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy of objectives? Letter A explains how a tree functions in relation to the ecosystem. Letter B, explain how trees receive nutrients. Letter C, rate 3 different methods of controlling tree growth. Letter D, lists the parts of a tree. Okay, answer please. Sige, the answer, ayan, may B, may A, may C, ayan, iba-iba. So actually, it is rate 3 different methods of controlling the tree growth. So, ito yung pinaka-highest level, diba? Kasi it will what? It needs all learning about tree growth. Hindi siya basta ganong kababaw lang. Explain how a tree functions, so mababaw lang siya. How trees receive nutrients, so very factual. List the parts of a tree, it's very factual. Unlike letter C, you need all learnings that you have regarding the growth of a tree. Question? So here, dapat you make what? You make use of sense of elimination with the choices. So that's the very best thing that you can do when you do take the licensure examination for teachers. Oh, another question, sir. Which behavioral term describes a lesson's outcome in the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy? Analyze, create, infer, evaluate. Highest level, anyone? Evaluate. Okay, good. Ayan. So we're now down to the types of tests. So recall lang tayo ulit. So we have here the main points for comparison. We have purpose. So we have here the psychological and the educational. For psychological, it aims to measure students' intelligence or mental ability in a large degree without reference to what the students have learned. It measures the intangible characteristics of an individual. Example nito yung mga aptitude test, personality test, intelligence test. While on the other hand, kapag educational, we are more of the results of the teaching and learning process. Take note of that. So it's more of the achievement tests and the performance tests. Also, when it comes to scope and content, we have survey test and mastery test. So pag survey test, it covers a broad range of objectives. So malawak ang sakop niya. It measures general achievement in a certain subject. So pangkabuuang concepts and learning in a particular course or a particular subject. And then pag mastery naman, it's more of a specific objective and it measures fundamental skills and abilities. We also have the language mode. We have verbal and non-verbal. Kapag verbal test, words are used by students in attaching meaning to or corresponding to test items. And then kapag non-verbal, students do not use words in attaching meaning to or in responding to test items. Example nito, yung mga graphs, numbers, or 3D subjects. Then we also have, according to the construction, we have standardized and the informal. Kapag standardized, the test is constructed by professional item writers or by experts. It covers a broad range of content covered in a subject area. So malawak din yung scope niya. And it's using mainly multiple choice. Pansinin nyo kapag standardized test, katulad ng LET. LET is considered to be a standardized test. It makes use mainly of multiple choice. Okay? And then items written are screened and the best items were chosen for the final instrument. So actually, kapag nag-prepare tayo ng ng standardized test, technically, so hindi siya basta kung ano lang yung test na nandun, yun lang yung gagawin mo. No. So marami yung questions na gagawin and then to finalize the instrument, we will be choosing the best questions or items na meron. For the informal, it's constructed basically by classroom teachers like us. And then it covers a narrow range of content. So depende sa scope. It could be a chapter, it could be a particular lesson, and so on and so forth, or particular grading period. Then various types of items are used. So pwede tayo mag-iba't iba ng items, type of items, pwede multiple choice, true or false, pwede tayo mag-essay type, and so on and so forth. And then we have teachers picks or writes items as needed for the test. So depende sa need or urgency ng test na ginagawa ni teacher. Then another is for standardized can be scored by a machine. So kaya minsan, di ba, yung mga standardized tests, sa mga standardized tests, lalo na sa LET, hindi naman yan mano-mano i-check, right? So it is scanned by a machine. And then interpretation of results is usually norm reference. Ibig sabihin ng norm reference with respect to the test takers. Okay, so scores are being compared to all the test takers. And then on the other hand, kapag informal, scored manually by the teacher. So mano-mano yung pag-check ni teacher sa inyong exam. And interpretation is usually criterion reference. So ibig sabihin ng criterion reference, meron tayo mga criteria or criteria na ginagamit for the interpretation. Unlike sa norm reference with respect to the takers. Okay. Also, we have manner of administration. So for the manner of administration, we have individual test and group tests. For individual tests, it's mostly given orally or requires actual demonstration of skill. One-on-one situations has many opportunities for clinical observation. So more of ginagamit to sa mga researches. Pwede rin siyang gamitin into laboratory settings and the like. And then chances to follow up examinee's response in order to clarify or comprehend it more clearly. So dito, once na nag-respond yung ating participant, pwede tayo may follow-up questions para mas ma-elaborate natin yung response na binigay ni participant. For the group test, this is a paper and pen test. So ito yung objective type of test na ginagawa using paper and pen, literally. And then loss of rapport, insight, and knowledge about each examinee. Basta sasagutan lang. Diba? Parang ito yung mga periodic test, diagnostic test, or yung mga major exams ninyo. So basta sasagutan siya and it is done by group. Same amount of time needed to gather information from one student. It's because, diba, since gina-conduct siya as a group, so you are given a time frame. Same with all test takers. So kung 1 hour, 1 hour sasagutan. Kung 2 hours, 2 hours sasagutan, and so on and so forth. And then according to the effect of biases, we have objective tests and subjective tests. For the objective test, scorer's personal judgment does not affect the scoring. Ibig sabihin, yung tamang sagot, yun. Hindi pwedeng maapektuhan kung bias man or hindi ang iyong scorer or yung mag-check ng tests. Worded that only one answer is acceptable. So ibig sabihin lang, kapag objective type of test, there's only one answer or there is a definite answer to the question. And then little or no disagreement on what is the correct answer. So of course, since meron tayong definite answer, fix yun, so walang agreement na pinag-uusapan. Unlike subjective, it is affected by personal opinions, biases, and judgments. Diba? So pwedeng maka-apekto sa magiging result ng isang exam yung feelings, emotions, yung biases, and judgment na mag-check. Several answers are possible. So ibig sabihin there are multiple correct answer for a particular subjective test. And then possible to disagreement on what is the correct answer. So depende sa point of view, depende sa opinion kasi, depende sa judgment na mag-check. So therefore, correct answers may vary. And then we also have the time limit and the level of difficulty. So we have the power test and the speed test. So power test consists of series of items arranged in ascending order of difficulty. So from pinakamadali, papunta sa pinakamahirap na test item. And then we also have measure students' ability to answer more and more difficult items. So syempre, the more na nakaka-further ka sa power test, the more na mas difficult na yung sinasagutan mong level of questions. And then for the speed test, it consists of items approximately equal in difficulty. So every items are of the same level of difficulty and it measures students' speed or rate and accuracy in responding. So yun yung purpose kasi ng speed test. That's why of equal level of difficulty lang yung bawat item. So now, according to format, we have the selective and the supply. So for the selective, it either could be multiple choice, true or false, matching type. So ibig sabihin, there are choices for the answers. It can be answered quickly, prone to guessing. Yun lang yung disadvantage na, and time-consuming to test constructor. So kung sino yung magko-construct, siya yung mag-take ng much time to construct the test kasi marami kang dapat i-consider. Okay? So that's why ito yung sinasabi nila kapag ang iyong exam daw ay objective, mahirap i-construct yung test, pero madali siyang i-check. Diba? Para multiple choice. Napakadaling sagutan ng multiple choice, diba? Pero mahirap siyang i-prepare. Si essay naman, on the other hand, madaling i-prepare yung test question or the test itself, pero mahirap siyang i-check. So nakikita niyo yung kabaliktaran or ka-oppositan ng one or another. So madali, mahirap, madali, and so on and so forth. So we also have the supply test. Example of this are short answer, completion, restricted, or extended essay. There are no choices for the answer. Si mismong test taker ang magpo-provide. And then may require a longer time to answer. So syempre, since si test taker ang magpo-provide ng answer, it will take time to conduct the test. Less chance to guessing but prone to bluffing. So ito yung sinasabi na hindi naman pwede manghula pero pwede ka mang-bluff. Yung tipong you go around the bush kapag nagsasagot ka ng supply test. And then time consuming to answer and to score. And then we also have the nature of assessment. We have the maximum performance and the typical performance. For the maximum performance determines what individuals can do when performing at their best. Kaya nga siya maximum. Okay? And then at example nito ay ang aptitude tests and achievement tests. Well, on the other hand, for the typical performance, you have determines what individuals will do under natural conditions. So kaya nga siya typical, the usual. We have attitude, interest, personality inventories, exam observation techniques, and peer appraisal. So I hope nare-recall pa natin itong mga type of tests na ang assumption ko is na i-cover up ninyo when you have your assessment in Learning 1 and 2. Then according to interpretation, a test could be norm referenced or criterion referenced. Kapag norm reference, result is interpreted by comparing one student's performance with other students' performance. Ito yung sinasabi ni Sir Jester. Na kapag ang isang test ay norm reference, whatever is your result, it is being compared to other test takers or with respect to all the test takers. And then some will really pass, of course. So kailangan talaga natin mag-consider here na kapag norm reference test, talaga merong papas at papasa. And constructed by trained professionals. Kasi dito nagsaset tayo kung 70% ba ng buong test takers ang papasa, 60%, 50%, and so on and so forth. Then constructed by trained professional. And then criterion reference, result is interpreted by comparing students' performance based on predefined standard or criteria. So dito meron tayong basis for the interpretation. Meron tayong mga criteria, some sort of parang point of or basis or standard for the interpretation. Then all or none may pass. So pwedeng lahat pumasa, pero pwede rin na walang pumasa. And then typically constructed by the teacher. And then for the norm reference, there is a competition for a limited percentage of high scores. Kasi nga, di ba, with respect to all test takers. Kaya talagang there is sense of competition. Then typically covers a large domains of learning tasks. So broad ang kanyang coverage or scope. And then emphasizes discrimination among individuals in terms of level of learning. So talagang ma-differentiate natin who are good, who are not that good when it comes to norm reference because test takers are being compared with one another. Then while on the other hand, for criterion reference, there is no competition for a limited percentage of high score. So kung lahat makakakuha ng mataas na grade, lahat pwede makakuha. Kung lahat ay makakakuha ng mababa, pwede rin sila makakuha lahat na mababang score. And then typically focuses on the limited domain of learning. Okay, and then emphasizes description of what learning tasks individuals can and cannot perform. So pwede natin makita ano yung pwede nila magawa, ano yung hindi nila kaya magawa based on the items or test part na hindi nila masasagutan ng tama. Another, for norm reference, it favors items of average difficulty and typically omits very easy and very hard items. So kapag norm reference test ang kino-consider natin, mostly walang madaling tanong, walang sobrang hirap na tanong. All test items included are of average difficulty. And then interpretation requires a clearly defined group. So syempre, whoever are your test takers, interpretations will be definite for them. Then for criterion references or reference test, matches item difficulty to learning task without altering item difficulty or omitting easy or hard questions. So sa criterion reference test, merong portion na may madali, may average lang yung difficulty, meron din namang sobrang hirap. And then for the interpretation, requires a clearly defined and delimited achievement domain. So meron pa rin tayong standards na basis for our interpretations. Okay, so these are some sort of similarities between norm reference test and criterion reference test. Number one, both require specification of the achievement domain to be measured. So syempre, kailangan alam natin yung ating sinusukat or minimeasure na achievement. Both require a relevant or representative sample of test items. Of course, lahat kailangan natin ng mga test items. And both use the same types of test items. Both use the same rules for item writing. Okay? Pero, like I said, except for the item difficulty. Kasi nga, di ba, pag norm referenced, mostly lahat ay of average level of difficulty. Both are judged by the same qualities of goodness. So yung norm reference test at saka criterion reference test, they are being evaluated kung yung test ba ay good quality or not by the validity and the reliability. And both are useful, of course, in the educational assessment. Okay, so we now have here another question. So a test consists of graph showing the relationship between age and population. Following it is a series of true, false items based on the graph. Which type of test does this illustrate? Laboratory, problem solving, performance, interpretive. Is it A, B, C, or D? And may nagsagot ang C. There are some who answered D. Okay, D. Pero marami ang nag-answer ng D. Obviously, this is an interpretive. Bakit? Sabi nga kasi, di ba, meron daw tayong parang graph prior the question. And of course, the questions are based on the graph. So therefore, you need to interpret the graph for you to determine the correct answer. So that's why it's interpretive. So far, may question po ba tayo, class? Nakakasunod, nare-recall po ba? Actually, what you are doing here is just a review, a recall of what you are, of what you are expected to have known already. Kasi ito ay mga na-discuss na sa inyo previously. So far, clear naman po tayo, EDUC graduates. So far, so good. Nakakasunod po ba?
Yes po.
Ayan. Yes po.
Yes po.
Sige, tuloy lang
Yes
natin.
po.
So, types of tests according to format. Selective type provides choices for the answer. So, we have letter A, multiple choice. So, multiple choice consists of a stem which describes the problem or yung question mismo and 3 or more alternatives which give the suggested solution. So, the incorrect alternatives are the distractors. So sa isang multiple choice question daw, yung question, ang tawag doon ay STEM. And then we have 3 or more alternatives or yung choices. And then yung mga mali na alternatives ang tawag distractors. Then we also have true or false or alternative response consists of declarative statement that one has to mark true or false, right or wrong, correct or incorrect, yes or no, fact or opinion, and the like. So, dalawa lang yung responses, possible choices for the responses. Then we have the matching type, consists of 2 parallel columns. Column A, the column of the premises from which a match is sought. Column B, the column of responses from which the selection is made. Then we also have supply tests, short answer, uses a direct question that can be answered by a word, a phrase, a number, or a symbol. We also have the completion test. It consists of an incomplete statement. Then we also have the essay test. For the essay, we have a restricted response. So limits the content of the responses by pertinent to organize their answers in accordance with their best judgment. Okay? Ayan, wag na wag niyong gagawin yan sa let. Nako, patay kayo kapag ginawa niya yan. Cheating. Nakikita na po yung question sa screen.
Yes po, sir.
Parang nadidelay yung paglipat eh. So which assessment tool will be most authentic? Is it short answer test, alternative response test, essay test, portfolio? A, B, C, or D? We're talking about tool ha? Tool, not just a test. Assessment tool which is most authentic. Not just test. I'm giving emphasis. Obviously, it is the portfolio. Okay? So like I said ha, be careful with the question. Read it accordingly. So ang pinaka-authentic natin na tool na pwede natin magamit here will be the portfolio. Di ba? So kailangan pa rin talaga magbasa at interpret mabuti ang question. Which does not belong to the group? Short answer, completion, multiple choice, restricted response essay. A, B, C, or D? Of course, kitang-kita natin na si letter C kasi si multiple choice ay selective type. Okay? Okay, so we now proceed with alternative assessment. So performance and authentic assessment. So when to use, specific behaviors are to be obtained, possibility of judging the appropriateness of students' actions, a process or outcome cannot be directly measured by a paper and pencil test. So through paper and pencil test, that's the time you make use of performance and authentic assessments. Advantages, it allows evaluation of complex skills which are difficult to assess using written tests, positive effect on instruction and learning, and can be used to evaluate both the process and the product. The limitations, it's time consuming, like what we have mentioned kanina. It's time consuming to administer, develop, and score. Subjectivity in scoring is one of the limitations, and inconsistencies in performance on alternative skills. So, pwede magkaroon kasi ng inconsistencies which will or which can affect your assessment. So we also have portfolio assessment. What are the characteristics? Number one, adaptive to individualized instructional goals. So si portfolio kasi, it's an individual output na talagang adaptive per student. And then focus on assessment of products. Identify students' strengths rather than weaknesses. Kasi nga si portfolio, it contains the best work or works of the students. Actively involve students in the evaluation process. So students themselves are participants of the evaluation process of their performance. They communicate student achievement to others. Yung portfolio mismo of nagawa ni student could speak of the student's achievement. And then it is, but ang isang characteristic niya is it's time consuming. And number 7, need of a scoring plan to increase reliability. So para maging reliable yung magiging result ng inyong portfolio assessment, you need to do a scoring plan. Kasi nga, like I said, di ba, ang reliability is what? Consistency. So ibig sabihin, kung nag-score ka in this particular moment, dapat after a certain time frame and you do the scoring again, if not the same, similar results or similar score yung maibibigay nyo for the output to avoid biases. Okay? Rubrics, scoring guides consisting of specific pre-established rather performance criteria used in evaluating student work on performance assessments. So kapag performance assessments ang pinag-uusapan, di ba, it becomes objective, it becomes valid if you make use of rubrics. The rubrics kasi, it's a grading tool used. So meron kang set of criteria or standards, and then for every standards or criteria, you have varying levels of performance. From the perfect level of performance, yung pinaka-expected level up to the least expected level. So from there, ginegrade natin siya with the maximum point or score going to the minimum point or the least point value. We have different types of rubric. First is holistic. Holistic rubric requires the teacher to score the overall performance or product as a whole without judging the component parts separately. So kapag holistic rubric ang ginamit ni teacher, yung pangkabuuang product na yung bibigyan grade ni teacher. So yung rubric pang overall performance na, kumbaga. Hindi na naka-breakdown into component or standards. Hindi na naka-breakdown into content, creativity, originality, and so on and so forth. So the output is being graded as a whole, pero of varying level pa rin. Unlike analytic rubric, it requires the teacher to score individual components of the product or performance first, then sums the individual score to obtain a total score. So dito, sa analytic rubric, ginegrade ang bawat component. May bawat criteria na dapat i-check or i-grade. And then, saka lang i-add yung score per criterion to get the total score for the performance. And then, types of non-cognitive tests. So, iniisa-isa lang natin lahat na posible nating makita sa licensure exam. So, isa is yung mga closed item or forced choice instruments. Ask for one or specific answer. Kaya nga siya closed item or forced choice from the name itself. Lagi niyo tatandaan when you take the licensure exam, please you use your context clues, okay? Or you try to use context clues in the questions. Kasi yung mga questions natin minsan nandun na rin yung sagot. You just need to analyze the question. So we have a checklist. It measures students' preferences, hobbies, attitudes, feelings, beliefs, interests, etc. by marking a set of possible responses. So nakakita naman na kayo siguro ng checklist, particularly when you were in the senior high school, particularly sa research, ginagamit din si checklists. We also have scales. These instruments that indicate the extent or degree of one's response. So dito yung strongly agree, moderately agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So yun yung scales. So we have ratings scale, measures the degree or extent of one's attitudes, feelings, and perception about ideas or objects and people by marking a point along 3 or 0.5 or 5-point scale. So pwedeng agree, neutral, disagree. So that is a 3-point scale. Pwede namang 5-point scale. Strongly agree, moderately agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So that is a 5-point scale. Types of non-cognitive tests. We have a semantic differential scale. It measures the degree of one's attitudes, feelings, and perceptions about ideas, objects, and people by marking a point along 5, 7, or 11-point scale of semantic adjectives. Ito yung example. Math is easy and then blank, 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 difficult. So kung saan malapit yung iyong i-check, so doon natin i-interpret yung result. So yung bawat blank na yan,
Sir, nagcha-choppy ka po.
Ayan, naglolo ko na naman ang internet. So let me share to you the screen. Babalik tayo sa non-cognitive test. Okay, so let me just share the screen. Ganun talaga kapag online, one of the disadvantages of online learning. Ayan, naririnig na po ako, EDUC graduates.
Yes po, sir.
Ayan.
Sir.
Ayan. Can you hear me now? Ayan. Let me just share the screen. Ayan, nakikita po. Ayan, naririnig po ba ako? Naglolo ko yung net ko. I can see it on my net. My internet connection is unstable. And can you hear me now?
Yes po.
Ayan. So dito tayo naputol sa semantic differential. So sa semantic differential, para lang din siyang scale or yung rating scale natin kanina. Okay? So para lang din rating scale, si semantic differential. Okay, so for example, you have math is 0.5. Ayan, naglolo ko ang internet. Am I audible?
Yes po.
Okay, sige. Palipasin natin 1 to 2 minutes. Tignan natin kung mag-stabilize na yung internet connection. Am I still around? Nag-stabilize na ba yung internet? Mukha. Mukha nag-stabilize na. Ayan. So let me share my screen. So dito tayo naputol sa semantic differential. Okay? siyang rating scale. Ang kaibahan, we have
Nawawala po ulit, sir.
hello? Ayan. Medyo nawawala talaga. Nagloloko yung internet. Ang kaibahan is just we are using opposing adjectives. So easy, then difficult, then nasa gitna yung 7-point scale natin. Denoted by 7 blocks. So dyan mo i-check kung ano yung magiging response mo. Okay? Then we also have important, then trivial. Then you have your 7-point scale in the middle. Useful, then useless. Then nasa gitna yung 7-point. Can you hear me, class?
Sir, medyo choppy ka po, sir. Nagpuputol-putol po.
Ayan, nawawala-wala ako technically. Hello? Ayan. So, unstable internet connection. Hello? Ayan, naririnig na po ako.
Nawawala-wala po, sir.
Ayan, I'm back. I changed my internet. Okay na?
Yes po, sir.
Yan. Sige. So at least we're done with the semantic differential. So ang kaibahan, kapag semantic differential, you use opposing adjectives, then you indicate your point scale in the middle of the two opposing adjectives. So let me just have the full screen. Okay. Ayan. Yan yung semantic differential. Another type of non-cognitive test is the Likert scale. So si Likert scale is the measures the degree of one's agreement or disagreement on positive or negative statements about objectives and people. So ito yung ginagamit natin sa research. Right? Kung particular kayo at naaalala nyo pa. So use the scale below to rate how much you agree or disagree about the following statements. You have 5, strongly agree, 4, agree, 3, undecided, 2, disagree, 1, strongly disagree. And then for example, you have science is interesting. Number 2, doing science experiment is a waste of time. So i-rate nyo lang siya kung 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. Okay? Then another type of non-cognitive test is what we call the alternative response. It measures students' preferences, hobbies, attitudes, feelings, beliefs, interests, etc. by choosing between two possible responses. Kaya sa alternative, it's because there are only two possible responses. Example, true or false, reading is the best way of spending leisure time. Okay, so meron tayong two possible choices for each statement. It's either true ba or false ba siya. Okay, kaya sa tinatawag na alternative response. And then meron din naman tayong tinatawag na ranking. It measures students' preferences or priorities by ranking a set of responses. Example, rank the following subjects according to its importance. Science, math, English, social studies, and then arts. I-rank mo lang siya, 1 being the highest, up to 5 being the lowest. Then we also have open-ended instruments. So open to more than one answers. Example is yung sentence completion. We have measure students' preferences over a variety of attitudes and allow students to answer by completing an unfinished statement which may vary in length. Okay, so for example, ang best example niyan yung I feel I'm happy when blank. So fill in nyo lang kung ano para sa inyo yung magko-complete nung thought nung sentence. Surveys measures the values held by an individual by writing one or many responses to a given question. So yung surveys, depende kung ano yung content niya, depende kung ano yung focus na. Then another is yung essays. Allows the students to reveal and clarify their preferences, hobbies, attitudes, feelings, beliefs, interests by writing their reactions or opinions to a given question. So ito, para lang siyang essay type of test wherein your response will be in a paragraph form. Okay? Question. To evaluate, ayan, napindot ni Sir yung sagot agad. To evaluate teaching skills, which is the most authentic tool? A, observation. B, non-restricted essay test. C, short answer test. D, essay test. Obviously, kapag teaching skills, for example, sa demo ninyo, ang pinaka-appropriate na authentic tool na gamitin definitely is observation. Okay? So mas madaling makita if you are able to show necessary skills or necessary abilities when it comes to teaching. Okay? So here we now proceed with general suggestions in writing tests. So we have number 1, use your test specifications as guide to item writing. So lagi niyong tatandaan, when you are asked to write a test, the very first thing that you need to prepare is the so-called table of specifications. Diba? So siya yung blueprint ng ating test. And the next is number 2, write more test items than needed. So when you do test writing, make sure na meron kayong excess test items because hindi lahat naman ng mga ni-write nyo will be accepted. Possible results of its validity and reliability. Number 3, write the test items well in advance of the testing date, of course. Number 4, write each test item so that the task to be performed is clearly defined. So dapat very clear and specific yung mga test items ninyo. Number 5, write each test item in appropriate reading level. So depende sa test takers, of course. Number 6, write each test item so that it does not provide help in answering other tests in the test. So syempre make sure na hindi leading yung mga test items na. For example, yung test item number 1 nyo, isusulat nyo siya. And then yung test number 2 nyo, item number 2 nyo, is leading question when it comes to number 1. So hindi dapat gano'n. Number 7, write each test item so that the answer is one that would be agreed upon by experts. Of course, You need to consult experts pa rin talaga when you do writing or constructing tests. Number 8, write test items so that it is the proper level of difficulty. By the way, later naman, ipapakita ko sa inyo kung paano tayo mag-compute ng tinatawag nating level of difficulty. Okay? Sa bawat test items. Then we have number 9, whenever a test is revised, recheck its relevance. Of course, when you revise a test, make sure that still the test item revision is still relevant to the test that you're going to conduct. Specific suggestions, supply test. So for supply test, when you are writing test items for them, so you need to follow and observe the following. Number 1, word the items so that the required answer is both brief and specific. Actually, very self-explanatory. Just let me read this to you for some sense of review. Number 2, do not take statements directly from textbooks to use as a basis for short answer items. So never ever do that. Some sort of plagiarism iyan, mga anak. Number 3, a direct question is generally more desirable than an incomplete statement. So wag kayo lalagay or nag-include ng mga incomplete statement, use direct questions. Number 4, if the item is to be expressed in numerical units, indicate the type of answer needed. So kailangan i-specify nyo if it is in centimeters ba, in meters, kilometers, and the likes. And then blanks should be equal in length. So para syempre, hindi isipin ng bata na hahanapin kung ano lang yung mag-fit in na sagot doon sa blanks na meron ka, yun ay isasagot niya. Number 6, answer should be written before the item number for easy checking. Number 7, when completion items are to be used, do not have too many blanks. Of course, ang required lang is only 1. Then blanks should be at the center of the sentence and not at the beginning. So kapag nagko-completion items kayo at may blank kayo, never ever na yung blank is nasa unahan kaagad ng inyong sentence. For selective type, for alternative response, number 1, avoid broad statements. Number 2, avoid trivial statements. 3, avoid the use of negative statements, especially double negatives. Lalo na yan, mga misleading yan para sa ating mga students. And then number 4, avoid long and complex sentences. Number 5, avoid including 2 ideas in one sentence unless cause and effect relationship is being measured. So as much as possible, ang gagamitin talaga natin is 1 thought per sentence, 1 idea per sentence, unless you make use of cause and effect, wherein for that particular sentence, it requires 2 concepts or ideas. And then we have number 6, if opinion is used, attribute it to some source unless the ability to identify opinion is being specifically measured. So make use sources. Okay, yun yung pinupunto sa number 6. Number 7, true statements and false statements should be approximately equal in length. Tatandaan, minsan ang ginagawang basis para hulaan na lang yung test item. Kapag mahaba, true. Pag maigsi, false. Or kapag mahaba, false. Kapag maigsi, true. So wag po ganon. So when you do write sentences for true or false, make sure of equal length yung bawat sentences. Number 8, the number of true sentences and false statements should be approximately equal. Kung hindi man equal, nearly equal yung number of true sa number of false. Para kung manghuhula yung bata, they will only get at least not majority of the correct answer. So mamaya, lagay mo, puro true pala yan. Then naghula ang bata, puro true nilagay. Perfect na kaagad siya without really testing their capabilities. The number 9, start with the false statement since it is a common observation that the first statement in this type is always positive. So lagi nyo tatandaan, pwede nyo maging technique when you write a true or false test, simulan nyo sa false. Kasi minsan ang iniisip talaga ng mga student is that, simulan nito laging true. Okay, so it's that idea. When you're writing matching type, number 1, use only homogeneous materials in a single matching exercise. Homogeneous meaning one type. of one kind. Okay? Number 2, include an unequal number of referent responses and premises and instruct the pupils that response may be used once, more than once, or not at all. So dito kapag matching type ang ginagawa nyo, huwag nyo i-equal. Kunwari yung column A nyo 10, column B nyo 10 din. So try nyo na sobrahan, and then sa instruction nyo, you instruct your students na pwede silang mag-use ng mga choices more than once. Okay? Para mas of high level. Then number 3, keep the list of items to be matched, brief, and place the shorter responses on the right. So for column A, lagi nyo tatandaan, yung ating mga list na nandun, as much as possible, you make it brief and concise. Okay? And then yung mga choices natin, make it shorter. So yun naman yung nasa column B. Then next, arrange the list of responses in logical order. Make sure you have basis for the arrangement. Number 5, indicate in the direction, the basis for matching the responses and premises. So dapat sabihin nyo, hindi lang basta match column A with column B. So ano yung meron kay column A na ima-match with respect to column B? You state it or indicate it in your directions. The number 6, place all the items for one matching exercise on the same page. Huwag kayong magpuputol. So para mas convenient kapag nagkakanda kayo ng test, particularly with respect to your students. For multiple choice type of test, you have number 1, the stem of the item should be meaningful by itself and should present a definite problem. So dapat yung idea na nasa question nyo or nasa stem ng inyong multiple choice type of question, it is what? It has sense. Hindi basta-basta makapag-create lang kayo ng stem and then incomplete thought siya, and then yung kukumpleto nandun sa inyong mga choices. Huwag po ganun. Okay, the stem itself should have a complete thought. Number 2, the item should include as much of the item as possible and should be free of irrelevant information. So, kaya mahirap mag-conduct ng multiple choice type of test. It's because dapat for your choices, you anticipate kung ano yung pwedeng piliin choices ng inyong mga takers. Katulad ng licensure examination for teachers. Sabi nila, mahirap daw ang test ng LET, particularly sa Prof Ed. It's because of the choices. Ang ganda ng pagkaka-craft ng choices ng ating multiple choice type of test sa LET, it's because pwede kayo ma-mislead na lahat ng nasa choices pwede maging correct answer. And then number 3, use a negatively stated item stem only when a significant learning outcome requires it. So never ever use negative statements unless required siya for the learning outcomes or for the competency. Number 4, highlight negative words in the stem for emphasis. So kung gagamit kayo ng word na not, i-highlight niyo siya. It's either naka-capital letter siya or naka-bold siya. And then, or naka-italiced. Number 5, all the alternatives should be grammatically consistent with the stem of the item. Ito yung sinasabi ko na when you prepare your multiple choice type of tests, hindi basta makapag-construct lang kayo ng choices. Kasi minsan, kung basta makapag-construct na lang kayo ng choices, madaling i-identify which is the correct answer. And then, number 6, an item should only have one correct or clearly best answer. So, syempre, kung ika-craft nyo yung mga distractor ay yung mga choices nyo na magandang quality, make sure na meron talagang best answer among those choices. And then number 7, items used to measure understanding should contain novelty but beware of too much. So ibig sabihin lang ng idea dito is that when you would like to focus with understanding, be sure to emphasize it in a way na hindi naman too much. Okay? Hindi too much in a sense na sobrang haba na ng inyong test question, napaka-lengthy na ng mga choices. So, hindi naman gano'n. So, alam niyo naman when to use it and when not to use it. And then, mahaba-haba sa multiple choice. Number 8, all distractors should be plausible. Number 9, verbal association between the stem and the correct answer should be avoided. So, dito, hindi kayo dapat nagpo-provide ng lead sa inyong question kung ano yung magiging tamang sagot. among the choices. Number 10, the relative length of alternative should not provide a clue to the answer. So syempre, hindi porket mahaba yung choice, yun na yung tamang sagot. Never ever do that. Kasi mga estudyante natin, magagaling yan sa paghahanap ng patterns. Number 11, the alternative should be arranged logically. So dapat meron kayong definite arrangement. Naka-alphabetize ba yung mga alternatives nyo? Ito ba ay according to length of the response? And so on and so forth. Number 12, the correct answer should appear in each of the alternative positions an approximately equal number of times but in random number. Ibig sabihin, yung arrangement natin ng correct answer, dapat hindi siya definitive na laging ganitong letter or ganito may pattern and so on and so forth. So make sure it is of random arrangements yung answer natin. At saka as much as possible, kapag multiple choice type of test, kung kakayanin nyo na equal or almost equal yung correct answer na letter A, sa B, sa C, sa D, gawin nyo para hindi talaga manghula ang mga students. 13, use of special alternatives. Example, none of the above, all of the above should be done sparingly. So wag naman tayo lagi or depende sa paggamit ng mga none of the above, all of the above. Minsan kasi leading na kapag bigla ka lang na gumamit ng none of the above, yun na yung correct answer. So wag po. Be creative and be strategic sa paggamit natin ng mga special alternatives such as none of the above and all of the above. Number 14, do not use multiple choice items when other types are more appropriate. So, wag nating ipilit kung hindi siya pang multiple choice. So, kung appropriate siya as true or false, kung appropriate siya mag-essay or other form of assessment or type of test, gawin natin. Okay, wag lang natin basta maipilit na multiple choice. Number 15, always have the STEM and alternatives on the same page. Ibig sabihin, wag lang tayo magpuputol. Ibig sabihin, yung question nasa page 1, yung mga choices nasa page 2, and so on and so forth. Number 16, break any of these rules when you have a good reason for doing so. Ibig sabihin, yung rules 1 to 15 natin, it's not always a must. Pero kung may good reason naman kayo sa pag-break or not following those rules that I've mentioned or those guidelines that I've mentioned, you may do it so, provided that you have a reason for doing it. Okay? Questions so far? So now we proceed with our lab questions. In preparing a multiple choice test, how many options would be ideal? Is it 5, B 3, C any, D 4? Ayan, sige, tingnan natin. Some answered D, Corpus Roxanne D, Janine Aguilar D, Shochi Jane
D.
Zaira D. Okay, so actually the correct answer is letter D, 4 choices. Okay? So now, proceed naman tayo kapag essay type. These are some specific suggestions. So number 1, restrict the use of essay questions to those learning outcomes that cannot be satisfactorily measured by objective items. So make sure na kapag nag-essay kayo, talagang yun yung type of test na appropriate for that. Hindi yung basta makapag-essay lang tayo. And also, depende pa rin naman kasi kung ano yung goal ni teacher. So kung gusto niya talaga i-develop yung higher order thinking skills ng students, most appropriately, madali maggamit or appropriate gumamit ng essay. Number 2, formulate questions that will bring forth the behavior specified in the learning outcome. So lagi lang naman natin itatandaan na kung ano yung nasa learning outcome na ina-expect natin, ipaparallel natin yan sa assessment natin. So kung parallel talaga siya for essay type, you may use essay type for your test. Number 3, phrase each question so that the pupil's task is clearly defined. So when you do essay type of test, make sure everything is clear when it comes to the instruction, to the question, and so on and so forth. Number 4, indicate an approximate time limit for each question. So kung kaya nyo namang i-specify na, for this question, you are only required to stay for about 1 to 2 minutes, you may do it so. And number 5, avoid the use of optional questions. Another question, what should a teacher do before constructing items for a particular test? Letter A, prepare the table of specification. B, review the previous lesson. C, determine the length of the time for answering it. Letter D, announce to students the scope of the text. which is the correct answer? Obviously, since teacher tayo, alam dapat natin na correct answer is letter A. That's good. Marami nakakuha ng tamang sagot. You should always prepare first the TOS or the table of specification. Okay. Very good, huh? Good tests. So we now talk about validity. Validity is said to be the degree to which a test measures what is intended to be measured. It is the usefulness of the test for a given purpose. It is the most important criteria of a good examination. So ito yung sinasabi natin kanina na kapag sinabing validity, dapat mini-measure ng test kung ano yung dapat niyang i-measure. So we have factors influencing validity. We have appropriateness of test, directions, reading vocabulary and sentence structure, difficulty of items, construction of items, length of tests, arrangement of items, patterns of answers. All of this contributes to the quality of validity or contributes to the validity of the test. So these are the ways of establishing validity. We have face validity, content validity. Pag face validity, you examine the physical appearance, yung itsura ng test. Kapag naman content validity, it's done through a careful and critical examination of the objective of the test so that it reflects the curricular objectives. So dapat yung test itself, what? Parallel to the objectives or the learning objectives. We have the criterion related. Validity is established statistically such that a set of scores revealed by a test is correlated with scores obtained in another external predictor or measure. So sa criterion-related validity, so we try to correlate yung naging result ng inyong test with respect to a currently existing na valid na test. So syempre, if they're correlated, obviously yung ginawa mo, valid din. So it follows na valid siya. Has two purpose. You have a concurrent validity, describes the present status of the individual by correlating the set of scores obtained from two measures given concurrently. And predictive validity describes the future performance of an individual by correlating the set of scores obtained from two measures given at a longer time interval. So sa concurrent, ito ay kino-compare or yung results natin for that particular test is being compared to two measures given concurrently. So dalawa sa bayan. So sa predictive, meron time frame na nakapat lang. Hindi siya agad-agad binibigay. It's because through predictive validity, we try to predict what is the future performance of an individual or a test taker. And then another is construct validity. Established statistically by comparing psychological traits or factors that influence scores in a test. Example, yung verbal, numerical, spatial, etc. So we have letter A, convergent validity is established if the instrument defines another similar trait other than what is intended to measure. Critical thinking test may be correlated with creative thinking tests. So ibig sabihin, you try to compare your instrument to something that is relevant. Pwedeng, for example, you are making a critical thinking test. Alam naman natin na yun ay correlated with creativity, so you can correlate it with creative thinking tests. Kaya siya convergent. Divergent establishes an instrument can describe only the intended trait and not other traits. Critical thinking test may not be correlated with reading comprehension. Divergent, ibig sabihin, hindi sila related with one another. So yung kunwari, yung critical thinking test mo, hindi mo siya pwedeng i-correlate with reading comprehension. It's because they're two different constructs. So now, after validity, we have reliability. So ang gagawin ko kasi po ngayon, just to give you an idea, tapusin natin yung discussion bago tayo mag-lunch break. Then after the lunch break, tsaka po tayo magkakaroon ng LET exam na 20 items. So magpo-produce tayo ng 20 items, ifa-flash natin sa screen, sasagutan nyo sa paper nyo yung 20 items, then later on, we'll reveal the answers to the 20 test items that we have. So para meron kayong practice questions ulit. bukod dito sa naka-insert sa ating discussion. Okay, so reliability naman is the consistency of scores. So kung si validity, mini-measure ang dapat i-measure, si reliability naman, dapat yung scores consistent even though the test is given on different time frames. Binigay ang test ngayon, may score. After a certain time frame, conduct ulit yung test, magkakaroon ka ulit ng score. So yung two set of scores na meron ka, dapat, if not the same, they are similar. Yun yung sense of reliability. So factors affecting reliability, length of test, difficulty of the test, objectivity, administrability, scorability, economy, and adequacy. So we have different methods to identify your reliability. So method is test, retest. Type of reliability measure is the measure of stability. So the procedure, give a test twice to the same group with any time interval between sets from several minutes to several years. So paano siya i-compute? You make use of the Pearson R. So kukunin mo lang yung Pearson product moment correlation coefficient ng dalawang set of tests. Then we have equivalent forms. So test of reliability is the measure of equivalence. So ang procedure, give parallel forms of test at the same time between forms. Pearson R ulit. So i-correlate lang yung dalawang results. Test, retest with equivalent forms. So measures of stability and equivalence, give parallel forms of test with increased time intervals between the forms. Pearson R ulit. Split half, measure of internal consistency. Give a test once. So dito, isang beses lang ibibigay yung tests. Score equivalent halves of the tests. So hahatiin mo yung test into two halves. Pwedeng odd and even numbered items. Then, you correlate. Pearson R, pwede rin Spearman-Brown formula. And then we have the Cooder-Richardson. So ito yung measure of internal consistency. So give the test once, then correlate the proportion or the percentage of the students passing and not passing. So kanina, odd even. Ngayon, passing and not passing. Okay? In a given item. So ang gagamiting statistical measure will be the Cooder-Richardson formula 20 and 21. Another question, setting up criteria for scoring essay tests is meant to increase their A, objectivity, B, reliability, C, validity, D, usability. Answer. Pag ba nagsaset up ka daw ng criteria for scoring essay, ano ang ini-increase mo? Yes, of course. Ang ini-increase natin once we set up criteria for scoring is objectivity para mas objective tayo in giving scores to our students. Another question. The same test is administered to different groups at different places at different times. This process is done in testing the blank, objectivity, validity, reliability, and comprehensiveness. Take note ha, different groups, different places, different times. Is it reliability? Yes, it is. It is reliability. Question? Ayan na, nakukuha niyo naman ng tama pala yung mga answers. That's very good sign. Napapasa tayo sa let. Hindi sa pinipressure namin kayo, ang last performance natin with the licensure exam is way far to the national passing percentage. A national passing percentage, nasa 50% something. We perform much better than that. So, nasa 78% passing tayo sa City of Malabon University. And we are hoping that we are able to maintain that results. Okay. Write the following words in alphabetical order. So, okay, so take note, this is a lesson in literal thinking. So apple, pumpkin. So talagang literal na in-arrange alphabetically yung letter per word. Okay? So take note of that. So now we are on item analysis. So dito papasok yung pag-compute natin. So we now focus with the what's so-called item analysis, particularly difficulty index. So suppose you have the following data. You have question 1, ang sumagot ng A, 0. Sumagot ng B, 3, C, 24, D, 3. So item number 2, 12 sa A, 13 sa B, 3 sa C, sa D, 2. So ang gagawin, we try to solve for the difficulty index or the DF. So to compute for the difficulty index, divide the number of students who chose the correct answer by the total number of students. So you may asterisk, yan yung correct answer. So for letter A, correct is letter C. For question 2, the correct answer is letter A. So gagawin mo lang daw, divide the students. So gawin mo lang, we have 24, diba? Divided by 30. And that gives you 0.8. Same din sa item number 2. You divide 12 by 30. Okay? And that gives you 0.40. So 0.80 is the difficulty index for number 1. 0.40 is the difficulty index for number 2. Okay. So ngayon, after solve, napakadali lang ng difficulty index. We now focus with the discrimination index. For the discrimination index, you need to follow certain steps. Score the tests, arrange from lowest to highest. Get the top 27% or T27 and below 27% or B27 of the examinees of the examinees for N is greater than or equal to 30. So kung 30 pataas ang number of students mo, kukunin mo yung top 27 tsaka below 27. And take note, if your N is less than 30, you get the top 50 and the below 50. Okay, so take note of those rules. And then get the number of examinees from the top group and the below group who got each item correctly. Okay, so that's the TG and the PG. Then compute for the discrimination index using the formula discrimination index is equal to TG minus BG over N. Okay, take note of that. So, where N is the number of examinees in the PG or the top group. Okay. Eh sir, ano bang essence noon? Pag-compute ng difficulty index tsaka ng discrimination index. So we can use them to interpret. 0.710, bibihin yung test mo is easy. So kapag easy ang test, you need to revise. Kapag naman ang iyong difficulty index ay 0.25 to 0.75, it is average. And then kanina, sabi natin, once a test item is of average difficulty, you accept the test item. So kapag naman ang na-compute mong difficulty index ay 0.00 to 0.24, it's very difficult. So that's why you need to reject the test item. For the discrimination index, on the other hand, if you have 0.40 and above, that's a very good test item. So that's why you need to accept it. If you have a discrimination index of 0.30 to 0.39, it is a good test item. So you need to accept it as well. If you have 0.20 to 0.29, it is moderate. Okay, and then you need to revise it. If it is 0.19 and below, the test item is poor. You need to reject it. Okay, so these are the table of interpretation for your difficulty index and for your discrimination index. Let's have an example. So suppose you have the following data. So student Joe, Dave, Suji, Daryl, Eliza, Zoe, Grace, Hannah, Ricky, and Anita. Their score in percent is 90, 90, 85, 80, 70, 65, 60, 60, 55, 40. Question 1, question 2, question 3 are given. Okay? Kapag 1 yung nakalagay, it means correct. Kapag 0, incorrect. Okay, so for question 1, kunin natin yung PT and PB. Okay, balik tayo sa data ha. Ayan yung data. Okay? By the way, balik ko sa formula para mas ma-screenshot niyo yung formula. Let me share it to you. Ayan. Ayan, screenshot niyo po iyan. I hope you're doing the screenshot. Okay. Yung kabila. Ayan, screenshot niyo rin po ang ating screen. Ayan, I'm hoping na you are doing the screenshot.
What the heck? Yan, namaligo.
Okay, so ito yung table. I hope you're doing the screenshot of this as well. Okay, now.
Hindi ko alam eh.
So we now have the following data.
Kasi parang clean ko yung
So may question po ba? Ilan lahat yung students natin?
Hindi naka...
Anyone? How many students do we have? 10.
10. 10, sir.
Right, we have 10 students. So nandiyan na rin yung kanilang mga responses. Okay, so ano yung PT, ano yung PB, ano yung DF, ano yung DS? So since 10 to, di ba? So ano kukunin natin? Upper lower 27, upper lower 50. Anyone? Ano sabi sa rule natin kanina? What will we get kapag less than 30? Upper lower 27% or upper lower 50%? So actually, dapat ang kukunin natin is actually yung 50%. Okay, thank you, Mr. Gapelando. Okay? So laging tatandaan kapag ang number of students na meron kayo, ang paghahati na gagawin natin sa upper, okay, ay sa upper at lower ay 50 kapag less than 30. Kapag naman greater than or equal to 30, ang hati na gagawin natin, 27% above, 27% below. Okay? So now, tingnan nyo mabuti ha, yung ating given data. So for example, we have question 1. So we now solve for PT and PB. Ano ba yung PT and PB na yan? Group. The one who get the correct answer. So sa ating question 1, ilan ang tumama sa top group? Ayan, naka-arrange na siya. 90, 90, 85, 80, 70. So mula kay Elisa hanggang kay Joe, di ba? We have them as the top group. And then yung below group, mula kay Zoe, papunta kay Anita. Ilan ang tumama? Okay. Ilan ang tumama sa top group? Sa question 1, 4.
4.
Okay. Ilan ang tumama sa below group? 4 din. So that's why we have 4 and 4. Can you follow? Then sa question number 2, ilan ang tumama sa top group?
0.
0. Kaya 0. Ilan ang tumama sa below group? 3. Okay? Sa question 3, 5 ang tumama sa top group, 1 sa below group. So ano ang pinakamadaling i-compute sa lahat? Ang pinakamadaling i-compute sa lahat si difficulty index. Diba? Si difficulty index, kunin mo lang kung ilan yung tumama, divide mo kung ilan ang students mo. Sa question 1, ilan ang tumama na students? Anyone from the class?
8,
There are 8. Tama? Ilang students meron lahat?
10,
10. Divide them. 8 divide 10. That gives us
0.8.
0.8. So therefore, our difficulty index for item 1 is 0.8. That's good. How about item 2? What is the difficulty index? You can use the chat box to give your answer. So yung number 1 natin, 0.8. How about yung number 2? So it is 0.30. Okay, good. How about number 3? What is our difficulty index? Okay, good. That is 0.60. Question. Now, interpret natin. 0.80. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng 0.80? What is the interpretation for 0.80? It is an easy test item. Okay, good. How about 0.30? What's our interpretation for 0.30? Yung question, 0.30 is average. Are you sure? Ayan, yes, it is. Average. So take note lang yung table ha. Binalik ko lang para meron kayong copy. How about yung ating number 3, 0.60. Still, yung item 3 natin is still an average test. Okay, good. How about the discrimination index? Ay, sorry, napindot ko. Alam mo na yung sagot. So for the discrimination index, okay. How do we solve for the discrimination index? Kung ilan yung tumama sa top group, ibawas mo yung tumama sa low group or below group, then divide mo kung ilan ang student sa top group. Okay? Ganun ang pagko-compute ng discrimination. Tumama sa top group minus tumama sa below group. Okay? Then divided by the number of students in the top group. So what is the discrimination index for number 1? So gagawin mo lang, 4 ang tumama sa top group minus yung tumama sa below group, which is also 4. So 4 minus 4, 0. Ilan ba ang students sa top group? 5. So 0 divided by 5 is 0. So ibig sabihin, the discrimination index for number 1 is 0. So ano ibig sabihin ng 0? It is a poor test
Poor
item.
test.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sino yun? Nabobosesan ko. Anyway, math major yun for sure. Nabosesan ko eh. How about number 2? What will be the discrimination index? Okay, so poor item siya, therefore, reject. Tama ba ako? Am I right, class?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how about number 2? What is the discrimination index? What's the discrimination index muna? What's the value? So yung tumama sa top group or sa above group or whatsoever, kung top group or above group yung gusto nyo gamitin, minus yung tumama sa below group over the number of students in the top group. That is negative 0.6. Bakit naging negative 0.6? 0, tumama sa top, minus 3, tumama sa below. Okay? That is negative 3 divided by 5. And that is negative 0.6. So ano ang interpretation natin sa negative 0.6? Anyone from the class? That is, louder please, mahina yung reception.
Rejected po.
Bakit po siya rejected? Because still it is a poor test item. How about number 3? What is the discrimination index? So obviously, na-reveal na ni sir, that is 0.8. Okay, bakit 0.8? 5 yung tumama sa top group, isa lang yung tumama sa below group. So 5 minus 1 is 4 divided by the number of students in the top group. Ilan ba ang students sa top group? 5. So 4 divide 5, 0.8. Okay? So that what is 0.8? Is it poor? Is it poor rejected pa rin by 0.8? Anong interpretation natin sa 0.8?
Very good, sir. Accepted.
Okay. Very good item ito and this must be accepted. Okay? So wag kakalimutan yung table natin. Okay? So by the way, I'll be sharing to you naman this PowerPoint presentation. Okay? Don't worry. So ngayon, eto na. Nasagot na rin naman na natin yan eh. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4 question. So hindi ko na ipo-focus to. Pero anyway, sige. Number 1, which question was the easiest? So kapag easiest ang tinatanong or most difficult, focus with the difficulty index. So which is the easiest? So ang easiest is question 1. Okay, good. Number 2, which question was the most difficult? The most difficult is question number. Okay, number 2. Good. Number 3, which item has the poorest discrimination index?
Number 1.
Okay, number 1. How about which question would you eliminate? Is it number 1? Balik tayo sa poorest discrimination. Is it number 1?
Sir, hindi
Number
po ba
two, sir.
question 2, sir? Question 2 po.
Question 2
It
po.
should be question 2 kasi siya yung may pinaka-lowest discrimination index. Okay? And then, which question would you eliminate? Is it question 1, question 2, or question 3?
1 and 2 po.
Isa lang. Which will you eliminate?
Question 2 po.
The question number
2.
2. So you should eliminate question number 2. Kasi yung question number 1, pwede nyo pa siyang i-revise lang basta.
I-revise lang po yung 1, sir.
Question so far with our discrimination index and difficulty index. So far clear tayo, head of graduates. Ayan, lumalabas to sa board exam as always. So dapat alam nyo siyang i-compute. Okay? We have here a question. Let question number, hindi ko na alam kung pang ilan siya. So we have another let question. Ayan, i-generalize na lang natin. So a negative discrimination index means that letter A, more from the lower group answered the test items correctly. Letter B, the test items could not discriminate between the lower and the upper group. Letter C, more from the upper group answered the test items correctly. Letter D, less from the lower group got the test item correctly. Which is the correct answer? Go. Is it A, B, C, or D? And some answer letter A. Letter A, letter A, letter A. Okay, check natin. Ayan, correct. The answer is letter A. More from the lower group answer the test items correctly. Evidence siya dito sa ating question number 2. Question, EDUC graduates? Clear tayo so far with our discussion? Use the chat box, please. So far, wala namang question. Are we clear? Sige, tuloy lang natin. Another, a test item has a difficulty index of 0.89 and a discrimination index of 0.4. What should the teacher do? A, reject the test item. B, retain the test item. C, make it a bonus item. D, make it a bonus item and reject it. A, B, C, or D? Answer. Is it reject, retain, make it a bonus, or make it a bonus and reject it? Yan, medyo napaisip kayo ha, ang tagal ng response. Yan, letter B, retain, retain, retain. Sige. Okay, correct. So you should retain the test item. Question so far, Edo? So now we proceed with scoring errors and biases. So we have the leniency error. Faculty tends to judge better than it really is. Okay? So mas mataas yung nabigay na grade, mas mataas yung naging magandang evaluation rather than the quality of the output. Yun yung tinatawag na leniency error. Generosity error. Faculty tends to use high end of the scale only. So regardless of whatever results or whatever output, yung matataas na scores lang talaga yung binibigay or ginagamit ni teacher. So that's what we call generosity error. We have severity error. Faculty tends to use low end of the scale. So kung kanina generosity, puro matataas yung binibigay regardless of the output, ito naman, puro mabababa yung scores na binibigay regardless of the output. That is severity error. We have the central tendency error. So pag sinabi naman natin central tendency error, the teacher avoids both extremes of the scale. So lagi lang siya nasa in-between scores. We have the bias, letting other factors influence score. So titingnan na kaagad lang yung handwriting, yung mga typographical error without considering the content. We have the halo effect or the halo effect. So letting general impression of a student influence rating of specific criteria or students' prior work. So for example, kilala na yung students na yun is napakagaling. Without looking into the output of the students, bibigyan na kaagad ang mataas na score. Okay? So for example, if yung students na yun pasaway, so kahit hindi niya tinitingnan yung output, bibigyan na kaagad na mababang score. So that's a big no-no as a teacher. And that is known to be the halo effect. We also have the contamination effect. Judgment is influenced by irrelevant knowledge about the student or other factors that have no bearing on performance level. So for example, i-judge na yung performance ng estudyante just because of the appearance. So that's what we call contamination effect. Okay? So we as teachers, we should always avoid all these errors and biases when it comes to scoring. Okay, we also have the what's so-called similar to me effect. So judging more favorably those students who faculty see as similar to themselves. So for example, nakita na, itong batang to kaparehas ko to ng hobbies, kaparehas ko to ng mga pastimes, ng habits, and so on and so forth. So that's why bibigyan ko siya ng mataas na score. So that's what we call the similar to me effect. Then we also have the first impression effect. Judgment is based on early opinions rather than on a complete picture. So opening paragraph. So for example, nagpagawa si teacher ng essay. As the teacher reads the essay, particularly the first paragraph, nakita niya na napakaganda ng paragraph, i-judge niya na kaagad yung output. na maganda as high with a high score or grade. So that's what we call the first impression effect. Without knowing na baka mamaya pagdating sa gitna, pagdating sa latter part of the output, there are problems, there are errors, there are things that needs to be done or revised, and so on and so forth. So yan yung tinatawag nating first impression effect. We also have the contrast effect. Judging by comparing students against other students instead of establishing criteria and standards. So wag din natin gagawin na we compare students' output with one another. Pero depende sa approach, no? And then, instead na susunod kayo sa criteria na binigay ninyo. Kasi di ba minsan, when a teacher gives for performance, binibigay din yung rubrics agad-agad so that the students will know how they will be graded. So instead of using the rubrics, i-compare na lang ni teacher yung pinaka-output per student. And they are going to judge by comparing the students with the other students. So that's a big no-no. So that's what we call the contrast effect. And then we also have the rater drift. So ano ang ibig sabihin ng rater drift? Unintentionally redefining criteria and standards over time or across a series of scorings. Getting tired and cranky and therefore more severe, getting tired and reading more quickly, leniently to get the job done. So for example, sa dami-dami ng check ni teacher. So gusto niyang tignan na lang na mabilis or basahin na lang na mabilis at an instant at one glance. Naiiba na yung basis niya sa pag-grade. And also, kapag galit si teacher, diba? So, wag na wag kayo mag-check ng paper or else there will be what so-called rater drift. And then, once you do checking, make sure to check the output in one sitting. Ubusin nyo siya, tapusin nyo siya sa isang upuan para some sort of consistency yung gagawin nyo. May consistency kayo when it comes to the grading. Never ever check kapag you're on bad mood because of course, the scores that you will be giving your students will be affected as well. So yun yung tinatawag nating rater drift. Okay? Questions about scoring errors and biases. So we now proceed with the scales of measurement. So we have different types of distribution. So we have normal distribution. So yung nakikita nyo sa screen is an example of a normal distribution. It is symmetrical and at the same time, bell curve siya. So the shape is like a bell. And then we also have a rectangular distribution. So as you can see, the screen shows us an example of a rectangular distribution. Then we also have unimodal distribution. So you will notice na meron lang tayong isang peak. Kaya siya unimodal. Meron tayong isang value na nag-appear ng most or ng most frequently. And then kapag bimodal, you will notice meron tayong dalawang peak. So ibig sabihin we have two modes. And then kapag 3 or more yung peaks natin na pare-parehas ng level, we call it multimodal or polymodal distribution. Then we also have the what's so-called positively skewed distribution or yung skewed to the right. Okay? Skewed to the right. So ganyan yung itsura ng ating distribution. Marami ang low scores technically. Meron din tayong tinatawag na negatively skewed or skewed to the left. Okay? So dito naman sa ating negatively skewed, marami naman ang high scores. And then when it comes to kurtosis, so this pertains to the stiffness of our graph. Kapag leptokurtic, so yung leptokurtic distribution are tall and peaked. So patulis, pataas ang ating graph because the scores are clustered around the mean, the standard deviation will be smaller. So marami tayong score na malapit sa mean. Then we also have the Mesokirtic distribution. So this is what we call the ideal example of normal distribution. So somewhere between the leptokirtic and platykirtic. So yung leptokirtic kasi yung patulis, masyadong matol or mataas yung ating curve. So si mesokirtic somehow in between the leptokirtic and the platykirtic. So si platykirtic, broad and flat yung itsura. Okay, so take note of the graphs. Now question, which statement applies when score distribution is negatively skewed? Okay, negatively skewed. Ano ulit itsura ng negatively skewed natin? Ayan, yung negatively skewed natin. Okay, binalik lang natin. So kapag negatively skewed, the scores are evenly distributed from left to right. Most pupils are underachievers. Most scores are high. Most of the scores are low. Okay. So obviously, ito ay letter C. Most of the scores are high. Kapag kasi negatively skewed, diba? Mataas yung patarik ng curve natin nandun sa high scores. So most of the scores are high. Okay. Another question. If the scores of your tests follow a positively skewed score distribution, what should you do? Find out blank. Letter A, why your items are easy. Letter B, why most of the scores are high. Letter C, why some pupils scored low. And letter D, why most of the scores are low. A, B, C, or D. Okay, some answered letter D. How about yung iba? Letter D. Yung iba, letter D. Okay. Actually, the correct answer is letter D. Why most of the scores are low. Okay? Kasi pag positively skewed, yung pinaka-curve natin or yung kurbada natin is nasa low scores. Question, Edo graduates, use the mic or use the chat box. Do you have questions so far? So far, so good. So, tinatry nating tapusin, i-compress yung mga dapat nating aralin with assessment 1 and 2 with our session today. Okay? So, please bear with me. So now, we talk about the appropriate statistical tools. Okay, so we have the following assumptions. When the frequency distribution is regular or symmetrical, or should we say normal, we make use of the measure of central tendency, particularly C-mean. So this is just the arithmetic average. Okay, add all the scores divided by the number of scores that you have. Okay, then when we talk about the measures of variability, we make use of the standard deviation. So this is the root mean square of the deviations from the mean. So pinapakita lang ni standard deviation how dispersed are the scores with respect to the mean. Okay, so ginagamit siya kapag normal. And also, when our data are numeric. Take note ha, interval or ratio. Then when the frequency distribution is irregular or skewed, getting skewed to the left, skewed to the right, ang ginagamit natin sa measure of central tendency is the median. The median is the middle score in a group of scores that are ranked. So kung meron ka mga scores, i-rank mo lang siya from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest and then get the middle score. That's the median. And then kapag measures of variability naman ang pinag-uusapan, you get the quartile distribution or deviation rather. So it's just the average deviation of the first and the third quartiles from the median. So ina-average lang si Q1 at saka si kinukuha lang yung average deviation rather ng Q1 with respect to Q3, the lower quartile and the upper quartile. And then when the distribution of score is normal and quick answer is needed, kapag normal naman siya at gusto mo makakuha ka agad ng answer, you use the mode for the central of tendency. Kasi si mode madaling identify. This is just the most frequent score. Ito yung score na may pinakamataas na frequency. Okay? And then, ginagamit din siya usually when the data are nominal. Okay? And then for the measures of variability, we make use of the range. Range is just the difference between the highest and the lowest score in the distribution. So kung ano yung highest, bawas mo yung lowest, ang makukuha nyo will be the range. Question. Teacher B is researching on a family income distribution which is quite symmetrical. Which measures of central tendency will be most informative and appropriate? A mode, B median, C median, A mode, B mean, C median, D mean and median. Answer. Wala po. Is it A, B, C, or D? So again ano ang clue natin dito sa problem natin? The word clue is symmetrical. Kapag symmetrical, it forms a bell shape. Obviously, it is letter B, C mean. Okay? So since the distribution is symmetrical, it forms a bell shape, it's appropriate to use the mean. Question? Next, what measure or measures of central tendency does the number 16 represent in the following score distribution? You have 14, 15, 17, 16, 19, 20, 16, 14, 16. A mode only, B median only, C mode and median, D mean and mode. Okay. First, solve muna natin yung mean. Sige nga, I'm hoping that you have your scientific calculators with you. 14 plus 15 plus 17 plus 16 plus 19 plus 20 plus 16 plus 14 plus 16, divide it by 9. Any answer? Anong mean natin with that? Again, 14 plus 15 plus 17 plus 16 plus 19 plus 20 plus 16 plus 14 plus 16 divided by 9 is 16.33. And then median naman, siya daw yung middle score. 14, 14, 15, 16, 16, 16, 17, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ang median natin, ang nasa gitna, si 16.
16 po.
Okay? And ano ang mode? Most frequent score. What is the most frequent score? The most frequent score is 16.
16.
So ang mean natin 16.33, obviously hindi siya eksaktong 16. Ang median ay 16, ang mode ay 16. So which is the correct answer?
Letter A po, sir.
Is it A,
Letter C po pala, sir. Mode
B.
and median.
C, or D? Okay, the correct answer should be letter C, mode and median. So yan yung sinasabi ko na nakita nyo ka, ay mode 16, oh, A kaagad yung sasagot nyo. Diba? So you try to compute first the other measures of central tendency. So obviously, the answer is C. Mode siya and also the median. Question. Okay, so the answer is letter C. So now we do interpreting measures of variability. So we have the standard deviation or the SD. So the result will help you determine the group, if the group is homogeneous or not. The result will also help you determine the number of students that fall below and above the average performance. So for example, main point to remember, points above mean plus 1 SD is equal to the range of above average. Okay, so ang mean kasi, siya yung nasa gitna. Diba? So kapag kinuha mo yung mean plus 1 SD, that is what we call above average. Okay? So yung nasa gitna naman ng mean plus 1 SD at saka ng mean minus 1 SD is the average ability. Always remember that. And then yung mga points below the mean minus 1 SD, it's what we call below average. Okay? So kapag kinuha mo yung mean, inad mo yung 1 SD, tapos kinuha mo yung mean minus 1 SD, okay? Yung nandoon sa pagitan ng dalawang yon, above average. Kapag naman mean plus 1 SD, yung mga nasa above part nun, above average. Kapag naman mean minus 1 SD, and then you get yung mga scores below that, that is below average. Always remember that. So example, a class of 25 students was given a 75 item test. The mean average score is 61. The SD is 6. Lisa, a student in the class, got a score of 63. Describe the performance of Lisa. So ang gagawin lang natin, kunin mo yung mean plus SD, tsaka yung mean minus SD. Okay? So ang mean natin is 61 plus SD, which is 6, is 67. So yung SD, yung mean natin is 61, kunin mo yung minus SD, so minus 6, 55. Okay, so ibig sabihin, lahat ng mga scores between 55 to 67, average. Okay? And then lahat ng above 67 or 68 and above average. And then lahat ng 55 or below 55, or should we say 54 and below, ang tawag natin sa performance nila, below average. Ang tanong, saan pasok ang score ni Liza? Anyone?
Average po.
Sa average
Okay,
po, sir.
therefore, Lisa's performance or Lisa's score of 63 is average. Question. So another question. Ito naman this time. This is a lead question. 0 standard deviation means that, letter A, the student's scores are the same. Letter B, 50% of the scores obtained 0. Letter C, more than 50% of the students or more than 50% of the scores rather obtained 0. Letter D, less than 50% of the scores obtained 0. Or less than 50% of the scores obtained is 0. Which is correct kapag 0 ang SD. Anyone? Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng SD? Siya yung nagpapakita ng what? Dispersion ng scores with respect to the mean. So kung 0 siya, ano ang interpretation? So kapag 0, the answer is A. It means that the student's scores are the same. So kapag 0 siya, walang dispersion. Kailan lang ba nagkakaroon ng walang dispersion? Kapag same yung score with respect to the mean. So ibig sabihin, yung scores ng mga students pare-parehas, and at the same time, that is also the mean. Clear? Question? So far, so good, Edu graduates? Okay. Another question. Nelly's score is within X, or the X bar dapat yan, plus or minus 1 SD. To which of the following group does she belong? Below average, average, needs improvement, above average. A, B, C, or D? Ayan, talagang nagigets nila. Good. Actually,
B,
the
sir.
answer is letter B. Correct. It's just average. Kasi pasok siya doon sa mean plus SD tsaka mean minus SD. And then kapag pasok ka sa mean plus SD tsaka mean minus SD, it means that your performance is average. Question. Another set of questions. So the score distribution of set A and set B have equal mean, but with different SDs. Set A has an SD of 1.7, while set B has an SD of 3.2. Which statement is true of the score distributions? Letter A, the scores of set B has less variability than the scores in set A. Letter B, scores in set A are more widely scattered. Letter C, majority of the scores in set A are clustered around the mean. Letter D, majority of the scores in set are clustered around the mean. Actually, that should be set B. Let me type in. Nakita nyo na kasi in-exit ko. So actually, the correct answer is letter C. It's because lesser yung value ng SD ni A. So the more na mababa yung SD, the more clustered ang score with respect to the mean. Okay? Kapag naman mataas ang SD, the more scattered ang ating scores with respect to the mean. Okay? Got the point kung bakit letter C? Since letter A has an SD of 1.7, lesser than that of 3.2, so we could conclude that majority of the scores in set A are clustered around the mean. The more homogeneous it is. Question? May question po ba? Sige. Interpreting measures of variability. So we have the quartile deviation. The result or the QD or the result of it will help you determine if the group is homogeneous or not. The result will also help you determine the number of students that fall below and above the average performance. Okay, ganun lang din. Kaso, this is with respect to the median. Okay, median plus 1 QD, median minus 1 QD, average ability. Okay, above median 1 plus 1 QD, above average. Median minus 1 QD means below average. Okay, pakita natin through an example. A class of 30 students was given a 50-item test. The median score of the class is 29. The quartile deviation is 3. Miguel, a student in the class, got a score of 33. Describe the performance of Miguel. So ang alam natin is median at saka yung quartile deviation. So ang gagawin mo lang, solve mo yung median plus QD, solve mo yung median minus QD. So that will be 29 plus 3, 32. 29 minus 3, 26. Ibig sabihin, yung lahat ng scores between 26 to 32, average. Then lahat ng scores above 32 or yung 33 and above are above average. And then lahat ng scores below 26 or 25 and below are below average. Ang tanong, what is the performance of Miguel? So ang score ni Miguel ay 33. Okay? If Miguel's score is 33, therefore, saan siya pasok? Is it average? Above average?
Yes.
Okay.
Above average.
Above average po.
Okay. Good. Miguel's score of 33 is above average. That's good. Question. Now, punta tayo sa correlation coefficient naman. So, correlation coefficient, when we see correlation, we're talking about degree of relationship. Okay? So, paano natin ini-interpret ang correlation coefficient? It's through the correlation coefficient value. So, 1, perfect positive correlation. Okay? So, ito, interpret natin. Nasa table naman siya, technically. So, kapag 0.81 to 1.00, very high correlation. Kapag 0.61 to 0.80, high correlation. Kapag 0.41 to 0.60, moderate correlation. 0.21 to 0.40, low correlation. 0 to 0.20, negligible correlation. Okay, and then, for validity, I would like to take note, kapag ang computed R is at least 0.75, significant siya. Okay, kapag naman reliability, at least 0.85, significant siya. Clear po tayo? So now, the question is, the computed R for scores in math and science is 0.92. What does this mean? A math score is positively related to science score. Letter B, science score is slightly related to math score. Letter C, math score is not in any way related to science score. Letter D, the higher the math score, the lower the science score. Is it A, B, C, or D? Answer. Parang 0.82 ha, yun yung key term nyo dyan or key value nyo. Saan ba papalo ang 0.92? Okay,
Letter
so
8
take
po.
note. Dapat alam nyo rin yung tables somehow. Ayan, binabalik-balik ni Sir Chester. So actually, the answer
Letter
should be
A.
letter A. Good. Math score is positive related to science score. Ano ba ibig sabihin kapag positive related? Kapag mataas ang math score, mataas din yung science score. Kapag mababa ang math score, mababa din yung science score. Okay? Kasi yung negatively related, magka-opposite o direction sila. Mataas si math, mababa si science. Mababa si math, mataas si science. Question? Clear tayo so far? So we now talk about standard scores. So standard scores, it indicate the pupil's relative position by showing how far his row score is above or below average. Express the pupil's performance in terms of standard unit from the mean, represented by the normal probability curve or what is commonly called the normal curve, used to have a common unit to compare row score from the different tests. So ito yung tinatawag nating z-score, t-score, or even percentile. Okay? So yun yung mga tinatawag nating standard scores. So ngayon, we talk about percentile. So si percentile, it tells the percentage of examinees that lies below one's score. Okay? So for example, Jose's score in the LET is 70 and his percentile rank is 85. So ibig sabihin ng P85 is 70 yung value nun, and that Jose, who scored 70, performed better than 85% of all the examinees. Naiintindihan? Ang P85, which is 70, it simply means that na ang score ni Jose na 70 is nangangahulugan that he performed better than 85% of all the examinees. So that's how we interpret percentile. So kung ang pinag-uusapan ay P90 or the percentile 90, ibig sabihin lang, you perform better than 90% of all the examinees. So that's how we interpret percentile. Clear? Then we also have the z-score. I know you're very familiar with this already. So z-score tells the number of standard deviations equivalent to a given raw score. So may formula tayo dyan. Z is equal to x minus x bar over x SD. X is the score.
Kadula ka. Buang na ka?
Mute po ako ng phones, ng gadgets. Okay? Baka mamaya nakalimutan nyo siyang i-mute. Okay, balik tayo. Formula for z-score, x minus x bar over SD. X is the individual row score. X bar is the normative group or the mean of the normative group. SD is the standard deviation. Okay, how do we compute with that? So Jenny got a score of 75 in a 100 item test. The mean score of the class is 65, the SD is 5. So compute lang, Z is equal to yung score ni Jenny, 75, minus yung mean ng class, 65, over the SD, which is 5. So 75 minus 65 is 10, divided by 5 is 2. Ibig sabihin, ang Z-score ni Jenny ay 2. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng 2? So Jenny is 2 standard deviations above the mean. So that's how we interpret naman the z-score. Si z-score ang nagpapakita ng number of standard deviations away from the mean. Okay? I hope it's clear. Another? Saan ako? Ayan, mamaya yan eh. Yan yung sasagutan nyo. So let me just, ayan, nag-exit kasi. Ayan, dito na tayo, alright? So yung 2 ni Jenny na z-score, it means that Jenny is 2 standard deviations above the mean. Okay, another example. Mean of the group in a test. Ang mean is 26, SD is 2. So compute natin yung z-score ni Joseph at saka ni John. Ang score ni Joseph, 27. Ang score ni John, 25. Okay, so gagamitin lang natin yung formula Z is equal to X minus X bar over SD. So ang score ni Joseph, 27 minus 26, yun yung mean, over SD na 2. So 27 minus 26 is 1 divided by 2, 0.5. So ibig sabihin, ang Z-score ni Joseph, 0.5. While on the other hand, si John, ang score niya 25. So 25 minus 26 over 2. So 25 minus 26, negative 1, divided by 2, negative 1/2 or negative 0.5. So ang z-score ni John is negative 0.5. So paano i-interpret? Unahin natin yung kay Joseph. Ibig sabihin ng 0.5 is that si Joseph is 0.5 above or 0.5 standard deviation above the mean. Okay? Si John naman ay 0.5 standard deviation below the mean kasi negative. Question. Clear po ba tayo? Any points for clarification? Math majors, English major, social major, cultural ed, BPED, isa-isa ko na, BE-Ed, Prof Ed, or should we say, EdUc graduates. Question, nasusundan po ba? So now, proceed tayo dun sa isa pa tinatawag nating standard score, which is the t-score. So the t-score refers to any set of normally distributed standard deviation score that has a mean of 50 and a standard deviation of 10. Okay? So dito naman, nagagamit natin yung c-score kapag ang mean na pinag-uusapan natin ay 50 at ang SD ay 10. Eh sir, paano yung z-score? Hindi naman 10 ang SD nun, hindi naman 50 ang mean nun. So we can convert any z-score, okay, to a t-score. Okay, naiintindihan po? So ibig sabihin, yung z-score natin pwede ma-convert into t-score. So the formula is t-score is equal to 50 plus 10 times z. Okay? Going back, si Joseph kanina, 'di ba? Ang kanyang z-score ay 0.5. So para ma-compute natin yung t-score ni Joseph, substitute lang 50 plus 10 times 0.5. So 10 times 0.5 is 5 plus 50, 55. So ibig sabihin, ang t-score ni Joseph ay 55. Okay? While on the other hand, si John, ang z-score niya, negative 0.5. Substituting it into the formula, we have 50 plus 10 times negative 0.5. So 10 times negative 0.5 is negative 5. Kaya siya naging 50 minus 5, which gives you 45. So ibig sabihin, ang t-score ni John ay 45. Question. Clear po ba tayo so far, EdUc graduates, with our standard scores? Z-score, T-score, percentile, together with the interpretations. Use your microphone or use your chat box. Are you clear so far
Yes,
with the
sir.
discussion? Or is it clear so far with this discussion? How about yung iba po? Ayan. So medyo kailangan matapos na natin yung discussion before we have our lunch break. So we now talk about assigning grades, marks, and ratings. Marking or grading is the process of assigning value to a performance. So this is what we do in class or what we do in school. So mark, grades, rating, symbols. So yung mga usually ginagamit could be number 1%, such as 70%, 88%, 92%. It could also be letters such as A, B, C, D, or F. It could also be numbers such as 1.0, 1.5, 2.75, 5. It could also be descriptive expressions such as outstanding or O, very satisfactory VS, satisfactory S, moderately satisfactory MS, needs improvement NI. It could represent how student is performing in relation to other students. Kapag ang pinag-uusapan ay norm reference grades, the extent to which a student has mastered a particular body of knowledge, or when we're talking about the criterion reference grading. Okay. And number 3, how a student is performing in relation to a teacher's judgment of his or her potentials. It could also be 4. So the following are the purposes of grading. Certification. Certification that gives assurance that a student has mastered a specific content or achieved a certain level of accomplishment. Selection. Selection that provides basis in identifying or grouping students for certain educational paths or programs. Direction that provides information for diagnosis and planning. And lastly, motivation that emphasizes specific material or skills to be learned and helping students to understand and improve their performance. So ito yung mga purposes ng pagkakaroon ng grades, ng marks, or ng rating. It's for certification, selection, direction, and motivation. So there are 2 ways on how to assign grades. First is criterion reference grading. Katulad lang siya ng criterion reference test. Kapag criterion reference grading, you are being given a grade, okay, based on standards, a fixed or absolute standards. So meron kayong basis of grades, and that basis are standards or criteria. This is where grade is assigned based on how a student has met the criteria or a well-defined objectives of a course that were spelled out in advance. It is then up to the student to earn the grade he or she wants to receive regardless of how other students in the class have performed. This is done by transmuting test scores into marks or ratings. While on the other hand, we have norm reference grading. Kapag norm reference grading, this is based on the relative standards where a student's grade reflects his or her level of achievement relative to the performance of other students in the class. So ito yung sinasabi natin na yung performance ng bata is naka-base sa performance ng lahat ng estudyante. Okay. Then we also have the point or the percentage grading system whereby the teachers identifies points or percentages for various tests and class activities depending on their importance. So katulad dito sa college, you have let's say 40% final exam, 30% midterm exam. So may kanya-kanyang weight or percentage weight per component. And we also have the contract grading system where each student agrees to work for a particular grade according to agreed upon standards. So ibig sabihin, meron kayong communication with the rater and then you have your goal. Tama? You have your goal and it's up to you on how you're going to reach those goals based on your agreement on the standard. Kaya siya contract grading system. So now, I think, before daw, kapag bad ang grades, di ba? Kapag bad ang grades, di ba? The students is the one who's responsible for the explaining of the bad grades. Pero ngayon, when there is bad grade, the one who's being responsible for explaining the bad grade is the teacher. See the problem between the 2 pictures? Okay, so question, let question. Making on a normative basis means that, or marking on a normative basis means that, letter A, the normal curve of the distribution should be followed. The symbols used in grading indicate how a student achieved relative to other students. Some get high grades, some are expected to fail. Ano ibig sabihin ng normative? Anyone? Use the chat box. Is it A, B, C, or D? Ayan. So actually, correct. Letter B. Ayan. May mga sumasagot talaga ng letter B at nakakuha ng tamang sagot. The answer is the symbol used in grading indicate how a student achieved relative to other students. So yan yung norm, referenced grading. Question so far with our discussion? I think that's the end of our discussion. So meron po bang question, class, with our discussion? None naman so far according to Miss Aguilar of BSE Math 4A. How about yung iba? Like to hear it from other students?
None so far po, sir.
None so far. According to
Okay na
Miss
po,
De Leon, okay naman po. So that's the end of our review of the important topics for assessment 1 and 2. So for the afternoon session, yung second part of session natin, we will be focusing with the practice time. Ano ibig sabihin ng practice time? We will be having questions na mga let parallel questions. Ayan, fina-flash ni Sir Jester sa screen. Then, iisa-isahin po yan natin later on. Okay? And then, isa-isahin nyo munang sagutan. Then afterwards, I think 30 questions ito. Okay? And then afterwards, i-discuss natin yung correct answer. Okay ba tayo doon sa ating gagawin later, pagbalik ng 2 p.m. Pero mabilis na po ito, I think. So for now, since you don't have any questions naman with our discussion, we can now have your lunch break. Be sure to be back at 2 p.m. Okay? Thank you and have a good lunchtime. Salamat mga anak.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you po, sir.
Ito po.